Picture this. It's a Saturday afternoon. A guy named Marcus walks into a big box electronics store with one goal. He's been saving for 6 months. He wants a TV worth being proud of. The salesperson leads him to the display wall. Hundreds of screens, all glowing, all looking perfect under showroom lights. And right there in the middle sits a massive panel. Deep blacks, vivid colors, crisp motion. A Samsung, nearly $2,000. Marcus doesn't hesitate. He pulls out his card, takes it home, mounts it on the wall, dims the lights, and for a few weeks, it feels like the right decision. Then, one evening, a coworker mentions his TV. Different brand, different model, $500 cheaper. Marcus laughs it off until he sees it. Same room, same streaming service, same show. The other TV looked better. Not a little better, noticeably better. Brighter highlights, stronger contrast, more natural color. Marcus sat quietly for a long moment because he suddenly realized something. He didn't buy a bad TV. He bought a premium TV, but he never stopped to ask what premium actually meant. And that gap between what he assumed and what was actually true cost him $500 and a nagging feeling he'd remember every time he turned the TV on. The biggest mistake wasn't the television he bought. It was the assumption he made before he ever walked through the door. There's a belief most of us carry into expensive purchases. It goes something like this. If it costs more, it must be better. It's not irrational. For most of history, it was true. Better materials cost more. Better craftsmanship cost more. Better engineering cost more. So our brains developed a shortcut. Price became a proxy for quality. And that shortcut works surprisingly well until you enter an industry where price is carefully engineered to feel like quality, whether it delivers it or not. The television industry understood this a long time ago. When a company charges $1,800 for a TV, they're not just paying for components, they're paying for marketing, retail partnerships, brand campaigns, years of reputation building. They're investing in the feeling that $1,800 should feel different from $1,300. Psychologists call part of this price anchoring. When we see a high number, we instinctively assume more value exists behind it. We don't analyze it, we feel reassured by it. Retailers take advantage of this with something called prestige pricing, keeping a product expensive because the price itself becomes part of the appeal, part of the story. Walk into any TV showroom and you'll feel it immediately. The premium sets occupy the center, lit from above, running carefully selected demo footage. Footage that almost never resembles what you'll watch at home. The room is brighter than your living room. The content is chosen to hide weaknesses and exaggerate strengths. You're not evaluating a television. You're watching a performance designed to justify a price tag. And to be fair, the brands behind those displays have earned a great deal of trust. Samsung, Sony, LG, these companies have spent decades building legitimate reputations. But here's the part most buyers never stop to consider. A brand's reputation doesn't automatically transfer to every model it sells. Within the same lineup, at the same price point, you can find dramatic differences in actual value. The reputation is real. The assumption that every product benefits equally from it, that's where mistakes begin. Now let's talk about the language of premium TVs, because it's designed to impress. And it works. Not because it's dishonest, because most buyers don't have the tools to decode it. Start with refresh rate. You've seen the numbers, 120 Hz, 240 Hz, sometimes even higher. A bigger number sounds better, faster, more advanced, more premium. But many buyers don't realize there's a difference between native performance and software-created performance. A TV can advertise a 240 Hz effective experience, while the actual panel refreshes at a much lower native rate. For some viewers, that distinction won't matter much. For sports fans, gamers, and anyone sensitive to motion, it matters a lot. The specification is technically real. The assumption people make about it often isn't. Then there's AI processing. Every major manufacturer now has its own branded version. Samsung, Sony, LG, different names, similar promise. smarter picture quality. And to be clear, these processors do real things: noise reduction, upscaling, scene analysis, image optimization. But the phrase AI-powered has become more of a marketing signal than a useful buying metric. Choosing a TV because it has AI processing is a bit like choosing a restaurant because it has a modern kitchen. Technically relevant, but not enough information to make a decision. Upscaling tells a similar story. The phrase 4K upscaling sounds like ordinary content magically becomes 4K. In reality, the TV is estimating information that doesn't exist. Some processors do this remarkably well. Others create an overly sharpened image that looks less natural than the original. You can't tell which is which by reading a spec sheet. Then there's audio. Dolby Atmos support, premium speaker tuning, partnerships with well-known audio brands. Again, these are real technologies, but a certification doesn't automatically equal a great listening experience. The Dolby Atmos logo tells you what the TV can process, not necessarily what its speakers can reproduce. And finally, the two terms responsible for more confusion than almost anything else in the TV market: OLED and QLED. They sound similar. They're often displayed side by side, and many buyers assume they're competing versions of the same thing. They're not. OLED is a display technology. Each pixel creates its own light. QLED is an LCD television enhanced with a quantum dot layer. Two fundamentally different technologies, yet the names sound close enough that millions of buyers assume they're comparable tiers. And that's where many expensive mistakes begin. Not with bad products, with misunderstood products. If you're finding this breakdown useful and you want honest buying advice without the marketing noise, subscribe. No affiliate pressure, no sponsored rankings, just clear explanations designed to help you make better decisions before you spend your money. Because the next part is where things get expensive.
Now let's get specific. These are real televisions that real people spend premium money on every year. We're not here to review them. We're here to examine what the decision to buy them reveals about how people think. Because the most expensive mistakes rarely come from buying bad products. They come from buying the right product for the wrong reason. The Samsung QN85D. It's a perfectly legitimate mini LED television, and that's what makes it such a useful example. Most buyers don't walk into a store thinking about tiers within Samsung's lineup. They think about Samsung, the brand, the reputation, the years of advertising that taught them Samsung equals premium. But Samsung's lineup is enormous, and the QN85D occupies a very specific position within it. Below the models that generate most of the headlines, below the models that build most of Samsung's reputation. Yet many buyers see the logo and the price tag and assume excellence is guaranteed. Not because they've compared alternatives, because the combination of a trusted brand and a premium price feels reassuring. The lesson isn't that the QN85D is a bad TV. The lesson is, I bought a Samsung and I bought the right Samsung are completely different statements. The Sony Bravia 7. Sony may be the strongest example of prestige pricing in the television industry. And to be fair, much of that prestige is earned. Professional displays, Hollywood relationships, industry-leading image processing. It's a real legacy. But prestige has a cost. The Bravia 7 is a capable television, yet many buyers never compare it against competing models at similar prices. They stop at Sony. They trust the name, and trust feels easier than research. The irony is that the people paying the largest premium are often paying for confidence, not necessarily performance. And confidence is one of the hardest things to measure once the TV is hanging on your wall. The LG QNED 90T. This is where naming becomes surprisingly powerful. The QNED 90T sits just below LG's OLED lineup. And for many buyers, that creates an assumption. If it's close to OLED in the lineup, it must be close to OLED in performance. But lineup placement and display technology are two different things. The QNED 90T is still an LCD television, a very good LCD television, but still fundamentally different from OLED. Yet the naming creates a subtle psychological shortcut. Buyers don't compare technologies, they compare positions, and that's where confusion begins. The gap between what a product sounds like and what it actually is can be surprisingly expensive. The Samsung S85D OLED. Now we move into a different kind of mistake. Because once buyers learn that OLED is desirable, a new assumption appears, that all OLED are essentially the same. They're not. Different OLED televisions prioritize different strengths: brightness, color volume, image processing, panel characteristics. The S85D is a reminder that buying an OLED isn't the end of the decision, it's the beginning of a more detailed one. Because understanding the technology category isn't enough. You also need to understand the specific implementation, and many buyers stop researching the moment they hear the word OLED. The Sony Bravia 8. The Bravia 8 may be one of the clearest examples of brand premium hiding in plain sight. It's a good OLED television. Sony's processing remains excellent. Its image quality is genuinely impressive. But the important question isn't whether it's good. The important question is what you're paying extra for. Often the answer isn't hardware. It's calibration, processing philosophy, brand confidence, the feeling that you've chosen the safe option. Those things absolutely have value, but they're intangible. And smart buyers know the difference between paying for hardware and paying for reassurance. Notice what's happening across all 5 examples. Different brands, different technologies, different buyers, yet the same pattern keeps repeating. People aren't evaluating televisions, they're evaluating stories. Stories about prestige, stories about reputation, stories about what a premium purchase is supposed to feel like. And that's exactly where expensive assumptions begin. So what does an informed purchase actually look like? Not a lucky purchase, not a purchase guided by a YouTube ranking, a genuinely informed one. Interestingly, it usually starts by ignoring the logo and focusing on the hardware, the environment, and the intended use. The TCL QM8K. TCL doesn't carry the same legacy as Samsung or Sony, and that's precisely why informed buyers often notice it. The QM8K earns attention because of what it delivers relative to its price, not because of what people assume about the brand. High brightness, strong contrast control, mini LED technology, competitive hardware at a price that forces buyers to ask an uncomfortable question: how much of a premium am I paying elsewhere for the logo? People who end up choosing the QM8K usually arrived there through comparison, not familiarity. And that's a very different buying process. The Hisense U8 series. The U8 represents another version of the same idea: understanding your environment before choosing your television. Most people don't watch TV in a dedicated home theater. They watch in living rooms, rooms with windows, rooms with sunlight, rooms that aren't optimized for perfect cinematic viewing. The U8 excels in exactly those conditions, which means the buyer isn't choosing based on reputation, they're choosing based on use case. They're matching the product to the environment, and that's one of the strongest indicators of an informed decision. The LG OLED C5. The LG C series has earned something unusual in the television industry: trust from both enthusiasts and everyday buyers. Not because it's perfect, because it consistently balances technology, performance, and price. The people who land on the C5 typically understand why they're buying it. They understand OLED. They understand where it sits within LG's lineup. They understand the environments where it performs best. Most importantly, they've connected the technology to their actual viewing habits, not an imagined version of them, the real version. And that's ultimately the difference. Smart buyers don't start with brands, they start with questions. What kind of room am I watching in? What content do I watch most? What technology actually serves that use case? When those questions come first, the right television becomes surprisingly easy to find, and the marketing becomes much harder to fall for.
So let's build the framework Marcus didn't have. Because this is the difference between buying the right TV and simply buying an expensive one. Not a checklist, not a ranking, a way of thinking. One that still works even when the models, brands, and marketing slogans change. OLED versus Mini LED. Start here, because this is the decision that shapes almost everything else. OLED panels create light at the pixel level, no backlight, no compromise between a bright object and a dark background. Each pixel controls itself. The result is perfect black levels and exceptional contrast. Mini LED takes a different approach. Instead of individual pixels controlling light, thousands of tiny LEDs sit behind the panel, grouped into independently controlled zones. The best Mini LED TVs produce remarkable contrast while often exceeding OLED in raw brightness. Which one is better? That's the wrong question. The better question is, where will the TV live? Dark room? Movies at night? OLED becomes incredibly compelling. Bright living room? Windows everywhere? Daytime sports? Mini LED often makes more sense. The technology isn't the decision, the environment is. Brightness. Brightness matters more than most buyers realize. Not because bigger numbers are exciting, because brightness determines whether a TV can overcome your room. A television isn't competing against other televisions, it's competing against sunlight, reflections, lamps, windows, the real-world conditions surrounding it every day. If your room is bright, brightness should move near the top of your priority list. If your room is dark, other factors become more important. The mistake many buyers make is choosing based on the TV instead of choosing based on where the TV will actually be used. Local dimming. This is one of the most important concepts in modern television technology and one of the least understood. Local dimming controls how precisely an LED television manages light across the screen. Done well, it creates depth. Done poorly, it creates distraction. You've probably seen it before. An object appears against a dark background and a visible halo follows it. That's blooming. The goal isn't simply having more dimming zones. The goal is having a system intelligent enough to control them effectively. Because impressive specifications don't always translate into impressive results. And that's a theme you've probably noticed throughout this entire video. Motion handling. This matters most for two groups of people, gamers and sports fans. A TV can look fantastic during a movie and still struggle with fast-moving content. That's why native refresh rate matters. Not marketing language, not effective refresh rate, native refresh rate. For gamers, features like HDMI 2.1, VRR support, and 4K 120Hz compatibility can dramatically change the experience. The important lesson isn't memorizing every specification, it's understanding that different use cases demand different strengths. A TV built for movies isn't automatically built for gaming, and vice versa. Brand tiers. This may be the single most valuable lesson in the entire video. Every major brand operates in tiers: entry-level, mid-range, upper mid-range, flagship. The logo remains the same, the technology changes dramatically. That's why brand-based shopping creates so many expensive mistakes. Two televisions can carry the same logo and deliver completely different levels of performance. Understanding where a model sits within its own lineup is often more valuable than knowing the brand itself. Because that's where the real differences live, not on the front bezel, inside the product. Viewing environment. And finally, the question almost nobody asks, where will this TV actually live? Not the showroom, not the YouTube review studio, your room. How bright is it? How far away do you sit? What do you watch most? Movies? Sports? Gaming? News? The answers to those questions eliminate more bad options than any review ever will, because a TV that's perfect in one room can feel surprisingly mediocre in another. The right TV isn't the best TV, it's the best TV for your environment, and that's a distinction the marketing rarely wants you to think about. Let's go back to Marcus. Because Marcus wasn't careless, he wasn't uninformed, and he certainly wasn't stupid. He was doing exactly what most people do. He looked at the signals around him. A familiar brand, a premium price, a beautiful showroom display, and he trusted them, which is understandable. Those signals exist for a reason. The television he bought was real. The engineering was real. The performance was real. What wasn't real was the assumption attached to all of it. The assumption that expensive automatically meant best. The assumption that premium automatically meant value. The assumption that a respected logo automatically guaranteed the right choice. Marcus didn't lose $500 because he bought the wrong television. He lost it because he bought a story. A story about prestige. A story about reputation. A story about what a premium purchase is supposed to feel like. And that's what makes this industry so fascinating. Because the TV industry doesn't have to lie. Most of the time, it doesn't. The products do exactly what they're advertised to do. The real advantage comes from something else. Making sure buyers focus on the signals that are easiest to market instead of the factors that actually determine value. And the moment you understand that, something interesting happens. The entire market starts to look different. You stop asking, which brand should I buy? And start asking, what am I actually paying for? That's the question smart buyers ask, and it's the reason they often spend less money while ending up with a better television. Marcus eventually learned that lesson the hard way. You don't have to, because the people who get the best TVs aren't the people who spend the most. They're the people who understand what they're buying, and more importantly, what they're not.